Two new Pixel phones this fall, and the Senate introduced a bipartisan infrastructure bill with billions allocated for broadband. We are talking the latest tech news today with CNET, and joining me now is senior reporter Shara Tibken. Hey there. Google has shared some details about its new Pixel 6 phones, so tell us what you've learned.
Yeah, so there are going to be two new phones coming out at some point in the fall. The screens are a little bit bigger than the previous Pixels, and the really big change is something that's underneath the hood in these devices. Google has made its own processor that acts as the brain of these phones. It calls it Tensor, and it's basically trying to make these devices even smarter than they already are.
So why would Google want to have its own processor?
Yeah, so we've seen this happen with other companies where, in the case of Google, what they're trying to do is really focus on artificial intelligence. So instead of using a processor that other Android developers or other Android phone makers use, it's wanting to make its own processor so it can really customize what's most important to it. So it wants to be able to amp up things like making your photos better in low light, or if you are watching a talk in a foreign language, being able to see that translated in real time on your device, even when you're not connected to the internet. So it's really trying to make the artificial intelligence aspects of the Pixels much better than what you found in previous Pixels and other Android phones.
Okay, that's very cool. All right. Is it the only company making its own chips, or do other phone makers also design processors?
A lot of phone companies use chips from Qualcomm, but Apple is one notable exception, and it's been making its own phone chips for years. It kind of optimizes to make a really powerful processor that also consumes low amounts of energy. So it means that the iPhone can do a lot of really intensive tasks, but also not die halfway through the day. So we've seen Apple do it. Samsung makes some of its own chips. Other companies are working on it, like Microsoft. Google is kind of the latest to do this, and it's interesting that what it's focusing on is artificial intelligence.
Okay, switching gears now, the federal government has been considering major infrastructure spending for months. What's the latest information?
So the Senate reached a bipartisan agreement over the weekend they hammered out, which is notable. It's about $1 trillion of infrastructure spending, which will include things like electric vehicle charging stations. But a huge part of it is $65 billion for broadband. So the goal is to make sure that all Americans have super fast internet in their homes.
Okay, so the bill's actually so pretty much everyone will have access now to internet once all that gets in place.
Well, theoretically, it's never been quite that easy. In the past, we've seen tons of funding for broadband, but sometimes the funds aren't really used properly, or a company will say that they're going to build something out, then they don't. So the government now is trying to avoid some of those issues, and it's also trying to find ways to make sure that not only will people have service, but they can afford it. The lack of affordability for internet service has been a huge problem in the country, and it's a big reason why a lot of people don't have service at home. So what this bill will do is require anybody who's getting funding as part of this program will have to have a low-cost offering for people. The government also wants to encourage competition in areas where there's only one provider. It didn't really say how it's going to do that, so we're going to have to see what happens there. But it's trying to take all of these tasks to do things like eliminate digital redlining, which is where in parts of cities that are low income have been avoided by big internet service providers because they don't think they'll make any money there. So really the government's trying to do all it can to make sure that everybody can get online. The time frame we don't know, but the faster the better. As we've all seen during the pandemic, you have to have internet.
Yeah, with school and work all at home, definitely you need internet. How many people lack broadband at home?
It's really actually a tricky question. The FCC collects data from service providers, and earlier this year it basically said if you count satellite, everyone's covered. Anybody who lives in this country knows that not everyone has internet, so that's not accurate. Most recently, the government said about 30 million people don't have broadband at home, but it's believed the number is much higher. So like Microsoft tracks how fast people download its software, and it found that about 120 million people, or about a third of the population, isn't accessing the internet at fast speeds. So, it's probably way higher than that 30 million, probably closer to about a third of the country doesn't have fast internet at home.
Wow. Okay. Shara Tibken with CNET. Thank you very much.